Okay, hi, I'm Sim, and me and Sunny are going to be leading the session today. How did you find the psych session today? The readings and the homework? Okay, cool. So, like always, we're pre-med peers and we're a nonprofit. You can contact us through the Slack and email, and the session will be recorded so you don't have to worry about writing down all the notes, and we'll provide you with all of the slides as well. Does anyone have any prep course questions before we dive into the lecture? No? Okay, cool. So what questions do you have from the end of the chapter book from the Princeton Review and the Kaplan section? Feel free to unmute yourself because I can't look at the chat. Was everyone able to do the homework? Okay, if not, there's no other questions. We'll dive into the content. Sorry, I don't know what happened. I just got cut off. Let me share the screen again. Just making sure. Can everyone hear me again? Can someone just say yes or no?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to give a minute for Sunny to join, and he's going to go over the content for this session. Hey, Sunny, are you able to share your screen for the content?
Yep, I can share. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry for the technical difficulties. I'll just.
You're good.
Do you see my screen?
Yep, we see it.
So I'll just get started with some warm-up questions related to the readings this week. And these questions are via Khan Academy. I think I'll present the question and I'll give everyone 2 minutes to read it, and then you can put it in the chat. Does that sound okay?
I have a question. I'm not sure if it's just me, but yesterday I was able to do the chat, but today it's telling me that I'm not able to type in the chat. I'm not sure if I'm the only one who has that problem.
Sorry, who was that? I can double check.
I'm Christina.
Okay, awesome. Let me just double check your if you're in the system.
Yeah, because I was good yesterday for the biology section, and today it's not there.
I think we switched out your email. Sunny, you're good. I think we switched out your email, so maybe it's on the different one. So let me just double check. But other than that, everyone else, if you can type in your answer for that question. In the chat. Or you can unmute yourself as well.
I'm unsure to. I can't really see the chat. Sim is like, is there a lot of responses?
No. So everyone, can you put your answer in the chat now? And we're gonna go over it. So we're trying to make this interactive as possible, but it's really up to you guys how much you want to get out of this. So was everyone able to do the reading and understand this chapter? Or are you having trouble with the questions?
Where can I access the chat?
It should be in your settings somewhere on Teams. If you're not able to access the chat, after the session, you can let us know and we'll double check your username. But if you can put your answer in the chat. Otherwise, please just shout it out. Sunny, do you want to go over the problem?
Yeah. So it's just for this question, how would a symbolic interactionist phrase a research question to investigate the relationship between medicine and education? So once you see the theory symbolic interactionism, you generally think in terms of the small scale, which is everyday interactions between you and a friend or a physician and patient. And they really care about symbols such as language is a symbol, and these small scale interactions is really what they deal with, opposed to macro sociology where they look at the world as a whole. So here, out of all the responses, you can see in response C, how do the labels a patient applies to the level of education differ between nurse practitioners and doctors? So that would be a good application of symbolic interactionism. Whereas if you look at A, how does social inequity cause unequal access to education and proper medical care? So that deals with a conflict theory that deals with inequity. B is what influences do stricter requirements for medical school admissions have on the medical community as a whole? And this question, it doesn't really deal with symbolic interactionism as it's more broad, whereas symbolic interaction is more narrow in terms of everyday interactions. And D is how does gender inequity in medical education influence the opportunities women have in specialized medicine. So this is a theory we'll also be learning about, which is feminist theory. So if anyone has any questions, you can type in the chat for this question or just unmute yourself. So we'll be moving on to the next question. Which of these best describes an assumption of exchange theory perspective?
Yeah, my chat isn't working, so I'll say B.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just get started with this question. Uh, so so we can go in like A, B, C, D in order. So it best describes an assumption of exchange theory perspective. When you think about it in terms of the exchange theory, you always think about uh, applying a rational choice theory to everyday interactions. So in rational choice, you always think about the costs versus benefits. And in exchange theory, you applied it to everyday conversations, such as you and a friend, or a patient and a physician, etc. So in terms of A, social, so part A, social interactions are static over time. So in terms of that, social interactions, they're often not static, they can often change. And B, if a person receives social approval from an action, the action will be repeated. And this is true in terms of if you receive a reward, such as an interaction or you do something and you get a reward for it, that it's more likely to be repeated. And C, the more often that one is rewarded, the higher the benefit associated with that choice. In terms of this option, the research shows that the more often you're rewarded, the less likely the ben- the less likely there's a benefit associated with that choice. For example, if you consistently receive the reward, you don't want it as much as you did when you did not have it. And lastly, D, people do not actually make rational choices. So exchange theory is based on the rational choice theory, which assumes that people make rational choices and they weigh the pros and cons or the costs and benefits. And finally, this is the last warm-up question, which is Sanja's teacher asked each student his or her favorite color. When Sanja replied that her favorite color was red, her teacher told her that pink was a more appropriate color for a girl to like. What is the term for this form of social reinforcement?
My chat isn't working either, but I would say C, the hidden curriculum.
Thank you. So I don't see any chat prompts coming up anymore. So we can go over this question. So in terms of this question, it's more of the color in terms of pink for a girl, and then you assume that other colors are for boys. So in terms of gentrification, it's a term that's not even related to this prompt. It's more deals with people moving into a town and then revamping it, and then the original inhabitants of that area are forced to move out as that area becomes more expensive. B is formal education, and formal education is something you think about in general learning, where you get textbooks and then you learn all these subjects such as biology and chemistry. And this is not really formal education of that you learn what colors are for the different genders. And C is the hidden curriculum. And this is the answer, because once you think about school, there's the manifest function and also the latent function. Once you think about in terms of functionalism, there's always the manifest function or the intended function, which is learning biology. But the latent function is something that comes along in terms of doing that, which is learning gender norms or social norms as well. And this is where the teacher says that pink is a more appropriate color for a girl to like. And D is gender stratification. This may seem like it's the answer, but in terms of stratification, it has to do more in terms of inequality. And there's nothing here that deals with inequality. It's more of like in terms of the colors and gender norms and dealing with that type of a topic instead of stratification or inequality. So this session overview, we'll be reviewing these 9 topics as seen in your syllabus. So we'll just get started with a broad overview in terms of macro sociology versus micro sociology. Macro sociology is a large scale perspective. It looks at phenomena that affect a big portion of the population. So you should think big picture, such as social structures and institutions, civilizations or populations, and the theories that are associated with macro sociology are functionalism and conflict theory, as we'll learn. And also there's micro sociology, which is very small scale, face-to-face interactions, family, schools, and other social interactions. You think in terms of small picture, physician-patient interactions, in terms of medicine or family dynamics, and symbolic interactionism theory is one theory that falls under microsociology. So let's move on to functionalism, which is brought forth by Emile Durkheim. Looks at it looks at sociology, looks at society from the big picture perspective. So macro sociology and how each part helps to keep society stable. So in terms of functionalism in the future, always try to keep functionalism. The next word that should come to mind is stability or equilibrium. And society is heading towards equilibrium and a focus on social structures that shape society as a whole. And here in this graph on the right, you can see some of the social institutions such as family, education, religion, and crime that all feed into the stability and equilibrium of society. And society is dependent on structures that is made of, as you've seen in the figure in the previous slide. The intended consequences of institution are manifest functions, such as businesses provide a school educate people so that they can get jobs, and laws maintain social order. However, there are also unintended consequences, such as schools expose students to social connections and new activities, and also a way you can make friends, and businesses connect people across society, which are known as latent functions in functionalism, which are the indirect effects of institutions, and also known as unrecognized consequences. Social dysfunction is a process that has undesirable consequences and may reduce the stability of society. The next theory is conflict theory. And in terms of making that connection immediately, always when you think about conflict theory, always think about in terms of inequality. So this theory was brought about by Karl Marx, and it focuses on inequalities of different groups in society. The rich upper class are called bourgeoisie, and they're the minority, and the poor lower class is called the proletariat, which is the majority. The term bourgeoisie refers to individuals of a social class that have wealth, power, and influence. And the term proletariat refers to individuals from a working class where their worth is determined by their ability to perform manual labor. Another theory is social constructionism, which was brought on by Berger and Luckman. Social constructionism argues that people actively shape their reality through social interactions and agreement. It's something constructed, not inherently part of the world. Things are social products made of the values of society that created it. A social construct is a concept or practice everyone in society agrees to treat in a certain way regardless of its inherent value. For example, money has no inherent value. It's just a piece of paper or plastic, but it's just a construct or the value that we place on money as a society as a whole, that it has some value. It's a theory that knowledge is not real and only exists because we give them reality through social agreements, such as nations, books, etc. And it does not exist in the absence of human society. Uh, Another big theory is symbolic interactionism, brought on by George Herbert Mead. It takes a small scale view of society. It focuses on small interactions between individuals, like hanging out with a friend. It sees society as a buildup of everyday typical interactions. Symbolic interactionism examines small scale or micro level social interactions, focusing attention on how shared meaning is established among individuals or small groups. It explains social phenomena in terms of the meanings that they hold when people interact with one another. So in terms of, this was one of the warm-up questions where we discussed symbolic interactionism. It has to deal with the meaning that's the central aspect of human behavior. As humans, we ascribe meaning to things and act towards those things based on the ascribed meaning. And language is one example. It allows humans to generate meaning through interactions, and humans modify meanings to thought processes, particularly interested in symbols that people use to contribute values or beliefs to others. Another theory is is feminist theory. Feminist theory is a contemporary approach of looking at the world from a macro perspective, and it's really closely tied to the conflict theory when you think about in terms of inequality. It's developed from feminism movement originating from conflict theory by focusing on stratifications and inequalities in society. Exa- it examines women's social roles and experience in education, family, and the workforce. It looks beyond more common male-based perspective to focus on gender inequalities in society. Women face discrimination, unjust treatment of individual because they belong to a certain group. And this is a term that you'll learn in other classes as well, where discrimination in terms of the hiring process, if you're a certain race or certain class, etc. Objectification, where when someone is regarded as an object and treated as less important. Oppression, where women are treated unjustly and encouraged to occupy gender-based social roles. And stereotyping, all women are viewed under the same oversimplified image. And rational choice theory is another theory that we discussed in the warm-up questions. It's people are not only motivated by money, but what's best to get better. The main assumption is that the idea that everything people do is fundamentally rational. A person is acting as if they were weighing costs and benefit of each action, and the goal is to maximize personal gain. People act in self-interest, driven by personal desires and motivated by goals. People calculate the costs and benefit of each action and choose one with the best outcome for themselves. So you can think about it in terms of an opportunity that comes up. For example, if you're given a job and you're thinking about in terms of the costs and benefits, the benefit might be the pay, but the cost could be the commute. And that's something that you have to think about, the costs and benefits and what you're trying to get out of the opportunity. And exchange theory is related to rational choice theory. It's an application of the rational choice theory to social interactions, these very small scale interactions, and you can always think about it in terms of the physician and patient. The exchange theory addresses decision making via a cost benefit analysis, and it looks at society as a series of interactions between individuals. Used to study family relationships, work relationships, partner selection, parenting, etc. And these are all interpersonal interactions. So in summary, the four major theories that you'll learn about for the MCAT are functionalism, and the main word that's connected to it is stability of society. Conflict theory is how society changes, and in inequality. Social constructionism is how things are given value, and symbolic interactionism is how individuals act in these small scale interactions. Uh, I was wondering, like, if there's a break, or should I continue?
I had a quick question.
Yeah.
So you talked about discrimination.
Yeah.
What's the difference between discrimination and prejudice?
A good question. So prejudice, it deals with idea that you have of someone. So in terms, it's often negative. So it's an idea that you have in terms of a group of people. So you may view a certain race of people as negative, and you do not want to hire, and you do not view them very highly. But the difference in terms of prejudice and discrimination is that prejudice, it just remains in your brain. You don't actually act upon it. Whereas discrimination is when you act on that idea in your head. So you don't view people from this race very highly. And let's say you're a hiring manager and you don't hire that person based solely on their race. So that would be an example of discrimination.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess like if you were to like maybe dislike a certain race and so you are giving like dirty looks, like that would still be discrimination.
I think in terms of dirty looks, if it's has to be in terms of like a hiring or a job opportunity, something in terms of a bigger scale. So it really affects them on a, like, they're not given an opportunity that someone from another race may get. It's just discrimination in terms of that.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Are there any other questions? Okay, I'll continue to the second part, which is research methods, finding key points of the study. So as you may know, as like practicing with the MCAT, many, almost, I'll say a large majority of the passages deal with studies. And as you can tell by once you look at the end of the passage, there's often a reference of where they got the passage information from, which is a study. So it's important to know the main parts of a study as well, which we'll be going over in the second part of this presentation. So once you see a research paper, there's clearly the title, there's the abstract, which is more or less a summary of the research paper. There's an introduction where there's the background findings, the knowledge that informed the study and why they want to conduct the study. There's the literature review, which is also the prior knowledge, which is often in the introduction. The methods is how they conducted that study. They explain in detail, step by step, what they did to carry through that study, what their variables were, etc. And results is often where you see the graphs. It's where they present the results and all the numbers that you see. And they don't really interpret the results, they just state the results as they are. And in discussion is when they interpret the results. What does B increasing as B A increase really mean? And that's what goes into the discussion. And the discussion is sort of like, at the end, it summarizes everything from the introduction, literature review, methods, results, and gives some idea in terms of the future plans of conducting more research, what they couldn't accomplish, what were their limitations, and really their future findings. And clearly there's acknowledgements as well, and finally the references. Uh, So I see a question, which is, what is the main difference between stereotypes and prejudice? Stereotypes, the difference is that stereotypes is just a general schema or idea that you have for a group of people. Stereotypes can be both good and bad. So once you think about a stereotype, of a certain group of people may be good at something such as dancing, which is a good stereotype. But a bad stereotype may be this group of people are very violent. So in terms of a stereotype, it's prejudice is more of a negative prejudice. You can also think about it in terms of a negative stereotype. Does that make sense? Whereas stereotype can be both good and bad. No problem. So research methods, how it gets tested. So in terms of this research process, you always think about what informs this research. And it's often an idea, observation or question when a researcher or research team, they see something interesting and they want to investigate it further, or they have a research question and they want to look more deeply into it. So then you do a literature review of what's really been conducted in this research area. And you research this topic and see if there's really been some research in this field or if it's completely new. Then you come up with a hypothesis or your predictions of what will happen with your research. You test it with an experiment to see if it supports your hypothesis or you can reject your hypothesis. And then you analyze data and finally, you report your conclusions. As you see all these scientific papers published online, is just also known as reporting conclusions. Also, presentations is sharing your research with the world is just called reporting conclusions. In terms of research methods, you can also think about it in terms of reliability and validity. Reliability is the degree to which an assessment tool produces stable and consistent results. So if you, for example, of a bathroom scale, once you weigh yourself, you always think about it in terms of if it's always plus or minus 5 pounds or 10 pounds, that scale is not very reliable. It's supposed to, if you went on the scale and it gives a reading and you go on it again, it should produce more or less the same reading. And if it does not, then it has very low reliability. And second is validity, the extent to which a measure reflects the phenomenon being studied. For example, you can think about a psychology test. You can think about a psychology test in measuring your attention span. And if this test doesn't really measure your attention span and it measures something else, then it has low validity. And you can also think about it in terms of the bathroom scale example. If it's measuring something else other than your weight, then it has low validity. In terms of it's not really studying weight, which is its intended function. Related to reliability and validity is accuracy, which refers to how close a measurement is to the true or accepted value. And precision refers to how close measurements of the same item are to each other. And the best quality scientific observations are both accurate and precise. So once you think about this figure, the first one has low accuracy and low precision. Accuracy would be how close you are to the bullseye, which is the center. So all of them are scattered around. So it has low accuracy. And also it's low precision as they're not close together. They produce far out results. This one has low accuracy because it's far from the bullseye, but however, it has high precision because all the readings or they're all grouped together and they less produce the same result. This one has high accuracy and low precision. In terms of this result, it's very close to the bullseye, but it has low precision. It's not grouped together. It's also spread out. And here it has high accuracy and high precision. It's very accurate because they're all on the bullseye, and they're very precise as well because they're more or less in the same location and they're grouped together. So in terms of your bathroom scale, you wanted something related to this. You want it to be your exact weight. So highly accurate, and you want it to be precise. You want it to not be far away from your actual weight, not like all the readings that you have, you don't want them to produce different results if you go after 10 minutes, after 15 minutes. You want it to have the same thing if it's in a small time frame. And I'll just discuss some research methods or flaws in research in study design and problems that can affect research results. So in your readings, it goes into more flaws in study design. I just want to discuss two here, which is confounding variables, which is a broad term for many flaws in study design. And they're a type of extraneous variable that are related to a study's independent and dependent variables. Your results may not reflect the actual relationship between the variables that you are interested in as a result of the confounding variables. And good subject tendency refers to the tendency of participants to act according to what they think the experimenter wants, which is related to the social desirability bias. It's a type of bias related to how people respond to research questions. For example, if you're in a research study related to doing good deeds, and the researcher asks you a question of how often do you volunteer in your community, and you never volunteered in your community, but you say you volunteer maybe once a month. It's it's where you want to seem desirable, but it also produces inaccurate results as the participants want to seem desirable, but then the researcher is getting all these inaccurate results, which doesn't really help the study as well, which is a flaw in study design as well. So I was wondering for the second part of the presentation, if anyone had any questions.
I had a question. I wanted to know where we could find this in the Kaplan section.
The research part?
Yes.
Yeah, the research part, it's more from the Princeton review, but I can confirm it and I can message you on Slack where you can find it. It's just I think the Princeton review had a better summary in terms of the research methods, but I will get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. So in terms of, if there are no further questions for the research part, I can hand it off to Sim for the practice passage.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. So today we actually have time to do the passage. I sent it in the chat. Is everyone able to see that, or should I put it in Teams?
I can see it.
I don't have access to the chat.
Okay, awesome. I'll put it in Teams as well then. Is everyone able to do that now? I put it in Teams as well. Okay, awesome. You guys can start, and we'll give you guys a couple minutes to do this passage, and let us know in the chat once you're done. Everyone has the passage, right?
Where do you go to find it?
I put it in Teams. If you just go to General. If not, you can search Jack Weston American Demographic Changes passage, and it should show up. Are you guys done with the passage, or do you need one more minute? Okay, awesome. So for the sake of time, I'll start going over it now. So how'd you guys find the passage in general? Was it easy, medium, hard?
I think it was pretty easy. I think I just need to get better at like picking out the important information, sort of being able to skip through like the filler, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. You'll definitely start to get better at those as you just do more practice as well. Okay, so to summarize, this was basically talking about a lot of the children under 18 in 2009 and explaining that with the total population. And then we go on to talk about trends that influence these numbers, such as fertility and immigration in the 1900s. And we have a graph. Whenever you have a graph, you want to try to understand it. Most likely, you will be asked a question about it. Later, we talk about why fertility rates start dropping. It's because of the baby boom. And how we talk about more demographic changes and how the child population grew with the baby bust, and later they started to shrink again. And we have some growth in the 70s and 80s with immigration and new legislation as well. So question 1, what did you guys say? And does anyone want to explain their answer? Were you guys able to do this question? Please put your answer in the chat. So whoever got B, do you want to explain how you did that?
Hi, so I looked at the right side of the graph, like in 2000, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, so I looked at the right side of the graph and we can see that in 2050, the share under 18 was 23.2%, and at that time, the population was 101.8 million. And also in the same axis, so it's 18.6% for share for 65 and over. So I divided the 18.6% divided by the 23.2%, and that gave me the ratio. And then I multiplied it with the 101.8 million.
Awesome. Yeah, that is definitely correct. I think whoever said A, I think you need to realize that there's two parts to the graph, and you have to look at both of them. So let's go over that. So here it's whoever the student was that just explained it. She looked at these two numbers and the population, and then you basically make a ratio out of those to figure out what how many Americans will be over 65. Does that make sense for everyone? So this ratio is around 3/4, and then you multiply that by 100. If you just round down, that gives you around 75. And the best answer would be around 82 then, because we rounded down. Okay, what about question 2? What did you guys? Yep, seeing a bunch of C's. So yeah, we want to look for anything that's going to increase the population, and that would definitely be C. If you're having a higher fertility rate and a higher elder mortality rates, that's going to increase the under 18 population. Okay, what about question 3? Okay, yeah, so here we want to look at the data and the passage. And the data in 2050, you see that a lot of the working age population is increasing, and that means the dependency ratio is also increasing, meaning more people are going to be working. And that can be explained by the increased work burden. If more people, if the age population is increased, to increase the dependency ratio. Does that make sense? Feel free to stop me with any questions or follow up. Okay, question 4. Yep, B is the correct answer. The Great Depression was not around that time, and C also does not make sense, and D also does not. Okay, question 5. Yep, so we want to look at the social interaction theory, and that considers social situations. So we want to look at those factors. A is more functionalism, which is looking at the bigger society and that picture. B is also looking at power, status, and resources, which is more of conflict theory. And D is looking at the biomedical approach. So C would be the best answer. Okay, last question. So which factors could contribute to this shape? Okay, yeah. Yeah, so we are seeing a lot more males, and so we can go through all the answers. So war would lead to less males because usually wars usually have males in them, and B and C would also increase or decrease both females and males equally. They shouldn't theoretically target one of them. So immigration for work would probably be the best reason for that. Do you guys have any question on the passage? Okay, if not, just some general tips for Psych Soc. Try to use flashcards, and Quizlet is a really good one, or Anki, and you can either make your own or download some pre-made ones. You can also use those Khan Academy video notes. Those are really good, and they contain a lot of information. If you would rather watch the videos or look at those notes, they're really great. And yeah, you'll learn about the decay theory later, but you definitely want to review your notes frequently because you'll tend to forget them. And since there's a lot of information on the MCAT, you're going to be better off reviewing in the long term. Are there any questions for today? So I hope you guys are keeping up with the schedule and doing the readings and homework beforehand so you can make the best use out of the prep course. It's supposed to be supplementary with all the other things you are doing. And if you guys have any other questions, you can either Slack us or email us, so please do that. Okay, if there's no other questions, thank you so much for coming today.